Hi, thanks for the great introduction. That was basically like the perfect pre-talk to the thing we're going to present now. First, I would just do like a little bit of introduction who we are. So we're both like studying at the University of Arts at the moment. We come more from like a design art background. I do a little bit of programming. Paul is a little bit involved into industrial design, product design. And it's really interesting because a lot of the themes which came up here are really close to what we're actually also proposing or what we're actually working on at the moment. So a lot of the talk here was also about property, and I think one of our main questions is also like, how can we give an autonomous process property, or is there a way of giving it property? And we will start with a small like analysis and a history of the term autonomous agent, which appeared kind of like the first time.
The water button.
Oh. Okay. Which appeared. So cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin for us already kind of a post-human technology because they enable programs already to own stuff. So if you want to go in a bank and want to open a account for like a program, the bank will say no, like this is no human, like you cannot open an account for a program. But in Bitcoin you can do this. You can open like a wallet and program this wallet with with a program, so it doesn't need a human verification. And we're not the first people who realized this. So even in 2011, there was a user called Jules on a Bitcoin talk. And he basically opened a thread which is called like Bitcoin the Enabler, truly autonomous software agents roaming the net. And this is kind of where we can trace the first time like how someone describes a truly autonomous agent which can like own property. And I will just quote him because I think the quote is really explains a lot. For the first time, there exists the possibility of a software agent to roam the internet with its own wallet. Using Bitcoin, it could purchase its resources it needs to survive, like hosting, CPU, memory, and sell services to other agents or humans. To be truly efficient and survive out there on the net long term, you would probably need some basic AI and the ability to move itself between service provider and occasionally. But even relatively dumb agent might survive for a while. So there we have already even AI mentioned. And of course, we think that Vitalik Buterin and Gavin Woods kind of took this thought of like autonomous programs and developed it even further in the Ethereum white paper, which is like called the next generation smart contract and decentralized application platform. And in this, they basically describe complex programs which can administer capital with a certain set of rules. And this concept, which is like the concept of smart contracts, is going back to like, of course, the computer scientist Nick Szabo, who proposed this earlier. And there we have like computer programs that can verify and enforce the performance of a contract and can basically own property. So the technology is basically there already. And while Maxwell and Jules thought of systems which could administer Bitcoin, their programs would still run on some like hardware which they might own. But smart contracts by Buterin and Woods kind of are decentralized and censorship-resistant programs, and they can gain and hold capital basically in the blockchain. So they're kind of like programmable wallets saved in the blockchain. So Vitalik Buterin developed this concept further, and there's a lot of like terminology. So he developed this further in autonomous corporations, where he attempted to develop a conceptual framework for autonomous corporation. And there he poses this like really interesting questions. However, here's a very interesting question arise: do we really need the people? The question is, can we approach a problem from another direction, even if we still need humans being to perform certain specialized tasks? Can we remove the management from the equation instead? So this is really the question: is there the possibility of having like humans humans just at the edge of a system? And this is also where it gets interesting, because this is where we like enter the domain of AI DAOs, which Trent talked already a lot, and Trent defines AI DAOs as a computational process that runs autonomously on a decentralized infrastructure with resources manipulation. So therefore an AI DAO is a DAO that uses AI technology, or it's AI technology that runs on a decentralized substrate. So this all, and there was also like another like thread which was really, which we really were, when we looked into this technology and into like this whole ideas which emerged from it, we found just later, and this is already from I think also 2013, and this poses the rather simple question underlying this idea is why stop at corporations as persons? Rivers, watersheds, coral reefs, mountain biomes all could be represented by decentralized autonomous corporations and the goods and services they provide defined in their charter. So Karl Schröder is a science fiction author also who writes quite interesting books. So we were asking the questions, or what we're kind of proposing with the project is just taking this definition or this question and extracting this defining criteria laid out by Jewell, Maxwell, Buttery, and Eckner-Connery and applying them to the idea posited by Schröder. And we kind of wanted Terra0, or this like proposed thing, to be a AI DAO for natural systems according to like 5 criteria. And these criteria are basically that the process is in control over natural resources or natural infrastructure, that the process earns enough money to maintain itself without human intervention, and that the process has an adaptive feedback system, and that when the process interacts with humans, it appears as a tool, as a peer, not as a tool, sorry, and the process can replicate itself and be able to gain control over more resources. And this leads to our main proposal, which is Terra0.
Yes. So Terra0 is basically a self-owned forest. That's not the actual forest, actually, it's an older picture. And it's an ongoing art project that strives to set up maybe a prototype of a self-utilizing piece of land. And from an economic perspective, an entity or an object cannot be separate from its purpose or function. So everything is determined by its usability by third parties. In a way, it's a bit harsh for me to put. And the forest, for example, has an exactly computable productive force. So the market value of the general output can be precisely calculated. And besides its function as, for example, a source of raw material, in this case wood, it also holds the role of a service contractor. And we try to, with Terra0, create a framework whereby a forest is able to sell licenses to log its own trees through automated processes and smart contracts. And in doing so, this forest accumulates capital, and this shift from valorization to third parties to self-utilization makes it possible for this forest to procure its own exchange value and in the end buys itself. In the end, the augmented forest is owner of itself and is even in the position to buy more ground and therefore to expand. And this concept or this can be realized on 3 different levels of complexity. Okay, yeah.
So we will just show you how this could work in like a really simple concept. So in the first phase of the project, the forest will be purchased by its initiators. That's basically us. We are the initiators. To set up the valorization model, we as initiators had to take an inventory of the trees. That means we have to like manually go around there and just see how many trees are there, what kind of trees there are, etc., etc. So the data of these trees, including like species, age, size, health, were connected manually and feed into the computational database. Also in this computational database, you have something which is called Ertragstafeln. Ertragstafeln are a thing which is used in like forests to calculate, like in forestry, to calculate the how much wood is grown new. So this is basically they're given by Forstwirtschaftsamt. So they're like really statistic empirical models. Yeah. So afterwards, a smart contract, which is containing all definitions, and the visualization model will be drawn up. This contract serves as a representation of the whole Terra0 system, regulating its exploitation in accordance with a certain set of rules based on the implementation. When the contract is drawn up, the forest will be signed over to it. Terra0 is then indebited to its project initiators, that's us. So the smart contract at the beginning, so we give all the rights to the smart contract, and the smart contract is then kind of has the smart contract then has all the Terra0 tokens, which are representations of the debt. So at this stage, the initiators holds all Terra0 tokens representing its debt. In the second phase of the project, an economic model, which is our smart contract at the moment, will basically control the exploitation of the forest. So the smart contract will get tree data, and in this tree data will get into a database, and it will also get triggered, and then based on a decision tree, the smart contract is basically then kind of deciding on which trees it can lock down to kind of like keep its population. This is like a really, really simple model, but it's just to get the idea across basically. So what it does then is kind of it mint tokens, and basically these tokens are representation of the actually wood the smart contract is like producing. So when this is done, the whole system can work that the user can basically buy wood from the smart contract, and the smart contract can pay us back. So at one point, the smart contract owns basically all of his own, all of his own shares. And in this case, we are kind of like, this is the point where we're interested in and where we're like questioning what happens there. Because there you have like legally, you have like this program, and this program basically owns all of the shares of the land. The information flow is really close actually to what Trent showed before in kind of in a you would say like a cybernetic way of like a legal system. It's called in German. So if kind of like feedback circle. So sensing device is collecting from the forest the data, transfers the data to the oracle kind of sends transaction in a smart contract, and the smart contract creates tokens and builds licensing, creates lock licenses, and the user is then basically buying these lock licenses and like transferring Ether back, and the user goes in a tree in a forest and lock the trees. So what we have here is kind of like a semi-autonomous system. It has at some points, of course, there are humans, like the user is kind of human, and of course someone who's like going into the someone who's like have to cut down the trees is basically also human. So this is not like a completely non-human system in a way. And this is kind of our end goal actually. So what happening here is basically that Terra0, that at the end when Terra0 has all its own tokens back, it basically owns itself. So the ownership of Terra0 is changed from our project initiators to us basically.
So to test the concept, we needed a forest, but came across some problems due to a limited budget, because it was like our own money. and the bureaucratic complexity of official channels. So it turned out that it was much complicated than we thought at the moment at the beginning to actually buy a forest, and it takes like months. It takes like
it's even really hard to buy
6
forest
to
as a
8
human.
months. Yeah. And this as a human. So actually we ended up collaborating with somebody who owns already a forest and was willing to set up Terra0 prototype on his forest. So this is a contract we signed with him. And the forest with which we are now working, it's quite a small forest. You can see it here. It has a total size of 1,200 square meters, and is located to Rüdersdorf, which is quite nice because it's not that far from Berlin. And it's composed mainly of pine trees ranging from like 60 to 70 years. And yeah, Stefan Seidler is the guy who owns the forest and was willing to take part in the project as the project initiator.
Yeah, we were there actually today, and we're doing. You see there the guy is called Frederik Buchholz, and he's like studying forestry. So he helps us at the moment with like models, with implementing models of like growth into the contract. And what he's doing there is actually really the analog way of kind of measuring the height of these trees. Yeah, I thought it's just interesting to have it here.
So these data we got there today actually was for building up these empirical models called Terra0 to set up like the first prototype.
Problems. There are a lot of problems.
Yeah. One was concerning the remote sensing. So in the first draft we tried to use satellite images, but I came across another problem, and they're quite expensive. So this one, which had like a decent resolution, was one image was for like 1,150 euros. And
so this makes sense if you have like huge like forests which can accumulate like a huge capital, but like in our case this is like there's no way this is in any way related in relation to like what this small piece of land can basically accumulate.
And because you can only buy like a huge picture of like a big part of Germany, you need also like the resources to analyze these huge data, which we hadn't. And the free ones were like had a resolution of 10 meters per pixel, and was like no good at all for us. So we thought, okay, let's get a drone. So we got we even labeled it as Terra0 drone. But then you have another problem. So where should the drone be charged and landed? And so we thought, okay, why not build like Terra0 infrastructure? But this led to another problem. So where do you get like the electricity from in the forest? And we ended up like finding new problems, solving them, and just like by making up new problems. So we even designed like a drone landing station, but then we had the problem that even with commercial drones, it was really hard to have like this whole system running. And then at some point we thought, okay, we just tried for like 2 months to solve problems which we were like which we don't concern with, like we are like interested in like a completely other direction. So we skipped like basically all of it.
And went to Ertragstafeln, which are really nice because they're used in forestry for a really long time. And they're like basically just empirical models of like forest growth. They work really well when you just have one species of tree, and at the moment we just have one species, like almost like just one species of tree, so we will just like stick with this. And the good thing is you can like implement them quite easy because they're basically just like a tabelle. Yeah.
So now the future of the project, or what we're doing now, besides like the realization of like the first prototype, or like a working prototype, we applied together with FZE, it's like a research center for informatics, some other institutions for like fundings to do a research project on how is it called, like a mixture of like participation, like citizen
bioeconomy and participation,
yeah.
basically. Yeah.
And we're actually in the final decision round. We will get like the results in like the next month. So, and this will also determine if we can work on it like on a long term, or if we have to just build like a halfway working prototype and leave it like this. And we also, because somehow we're still like a bit of artists.
Somehow this is still like an art project.
We also exhibit the project in several locations, also in the further field gallery, like I think in May, together with Plantoid, with what Trent mentioned before, and also at the Fiber Festival in Amsterdam next month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also nominated for the Ars Electronica one. So yeah, but yeah. Cool. Yeah, I hope that gave you some like overview of the project. So if you're like interested in either like there's a lot of stuff to do. So if you're like interested in solving problems, just talk to us. Or if you're like interested in the project somehow, yeah. And yeah, thanks for listening and thanks for having us.
So you mentioned Plantoid already. Have you considered following the same model, like just accepting donations to the forest directly for its preservations, if not for logging, for it to grow and buy more forest?
And to add to that, to make it a carbon offset project,
Exactly.
because I think if you get a lot of support, I would start like now.
This was actually our first.
You could measure it.
We thought about this a lot, but it's quite hard to get money from carbon.
Actually, there's like a hard regulation on these licenses, who can sell these, and we don't think that at this time it's possible to do this from an autonomous organization thing.
You do it through the crypto world, which, you know, and it's smart contracts and the whole bit. If we just trust you that you're going to do it, and you can verify the measurements that it's true.
Yeah.
You know,
but
screw the
The problem is these carbon things. They're not like for like normal consumers, but like for big factories and companies, and they rely on like trusted source. So I think this
just screw that. You just set up a wallet as part of the DAO to donate to, and just crowdfund it.
Yeah.
IDO, initial trio.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit the problem with also this is it might generate money even slower than our method. So which means like it takes really long till the thing is kind of like self-owning. So I think if you like do it with this kind of like CO2 things,
I think there's a bit of a confusion, right? Like these CO2 markets on the one hand are a tool contrived to sort of try to prevent CO2 being released, but if all forests like you propose can own itself, that is achieving the same goal without the CO2 market. So I don't think you really need to worry too much about the CO2 market. You want to have all forests own itself so that nobody can chop them down. I mean, I think that you can separate those two. And so crowdfund the shit out of it, like raise $10 million, buy all the power forests, buy all the forests.
Actually, we thought of it a lot, like doing crowdfunding, just because we don't have that much money and forest is quite expensive.
Have you spoken to the WWF?
Sorry?
Have you spoken to like WWF, any like forestry foundations or anything like
Yeah, but they were like a bit skeptical.
Buy the forest back.
Yeah. And it was like in the really early stage, and then we decided to do it just like with the wood, just to break it down to like a thing which is like explainable to people who don't know that much about like cryptocurrencies and stuff, just to make like a model to explain something.
Or one tree.
I mean, also what is embedded in this is kind of like, okay, you could take this forest, but you could also think of like other ecosystems, and like how could like ecosystems basically get paid for the services they already provide. So this is already kind of like it's already kind of in there, but like really like in the depths. So yeah.
But this is the thing, yeah. So what you're effectively setting up here is a model for creating context-related like DAOs for different biomes.
Yeah.
So effectively they're buying themselves back from whoever owns them currently, running themselves, and then as Trent was saying, you could feed all these narrow DAOs into an AGI.
But yeah.
One thing that struck me when I was reading your paper was the idea that, you know, the lifespan of these ecosystems is, you know, 10x even more than an individual human. And of course, the robot doesn't care, so it can last for decades, centuries, millennia. Do you have comments on this to expand? I think that's a really cool relation towards the social good.
Yeah, one thing was that if you look like at the history of forestry, you have like always like a returning cycle, which is like chopped up in like 3 sections, and there's like one lifespan of the owner of a forest who really cares about the forest and just like the forest really grows. And then you have like normally the son who got the forest from the dad, and the son had in mind that his dad did a lot of effort, put it into the forest, so they kind of like kept it like it is. And then you had like the grandson who just like didn't do anything and just chopped it all off, and it was like the forest was gone. And then in the 4th generation there was normally a person who had like this ground and somehow like I don't know what it's called, aufforsten, just like replant all the trees. And you can see this basically like in every big forest in Europe. And for example, this could be really good prevented by like a self-owned forest.
I mean, I really like the project. It's awesome. Just one fundamental thing I don't really get is that okay, I understand the core concept works like a charm when it comes to NGOs, but when you're doing like the AI owns something, sells something, there's always profit. Why would an AI need profit? I mean, I can't picture an AI looking at the garage and saying I would like to get a Porsche. Like, what's the? I don't really like in the NGO environment. I completely understand, but if it's not for growth, what's the reason of an AI actually running a business making profit?
In our position, I think it came from this that we didn't want to buy a forest and free the forest, just like in a generous act, but we wanted that the forest or the ecosystem kind of just like buys itself from like, so it uses like cultural or capitalist mechanism which exists and which were applied from the outside on this ecosystem, but used it on its own.
But why? That's also a point I have. Why? Why should a forest accumulate wealth? What is that good for?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
I mean, it does it already.
If I may just ask you why I say why not, is that why do we want to protect the ecosystems? Why some people care about the environment? So we're not separated from that. But we have this concept of money that is separated from it. So an apple tree, when you get an apple tree, you pay the owner of the tree, but we don't pay the tree. But the tree can be gone because people don't care about it, and the people who are making profit maybe moved on or whatever. But there's a separation here, and what I see in what they're doing, they're like bringing back some kind of unification with our money system. So that's why I say why not.
use the profit to fund a universal basic income.
Actually, we
Seriously, full loop.
had the first draft where
Do you have plans on containing the AI some way? Because I could imagine like doing something with the profit. We as humans are basically enemies of the forest at the moment. So, and we are attaching, like as Trent said, like the cars are like weapons at the moment, which they could use to destroy humans. Could buy cars and destroy humans, or like use the power grid to destroy humans. Kind of could be also a chance to handle as humans to basically get sustainable, because we're not sustainable at the moment. But do you plan on containing the AI, or do you embrace that concept of the forest getting power over us humans?
That's a really tough question. I mean, to keep it quite neutral, I think like it needs a discussion which is probably should not be led by just us, because we're like not the persons who like should do these decisions, to be honest. So I think there should be like of course a discussion which needs to be in every kind of AI discussion is what kind of like politics do you embed in the same, because like there's always kind of like politics embedded in every kind of like technique, and I think I think this opens to like these discussions, but it's not like we don't want to like give straight answers there. So we don't want to, yeah.
especially on this this problem or this question, what does the forest want? So we humans tend to say, okay, the forest or nature, we often use the word nature, wants to be like just like be there somehow, no human interaction at all. But there's no scientific thing where we can say, okay, this is what a plant wants, or like even if you're talking like about the forest, we were talking about the trees all the time, but what is with like all the others, like little bugs or like the other plants? And we tend to say, okay, we have like this romantic picture of like this really old wild forest, and this is like the ideal state of a forest, but it's actually not if you look at like what special plants need. It's like really horrible for them. Today we just talked to Frederik Buchholz, and he said, okay, this forest is really suffering, and we just said, okay, it's really nice because we have like a forest which is not like planted completely like in rows and looked like a bit wild, and we thought, nice, we don't have like a completely human-made forest, but just a bit of a wild place. And he said, okay, they are all suffering, just like they will die in a couple of years if you don't chop this tree down. So it's really hard to say. I think we tend to have like a romantic view of like what nature wants.